this title comes from a quote of Melville's. He says, "The swamp angel broods in his gloom. Despite all I have done to gain seclusion, the cares of the outside world invade. I parry against every small intrusion, outwitted by decisions to be made, whether to have toast or eggs for breakfast, buy a hoe or borrow from my neighbor, whether to plant cabbages or lettuce, repair my roof with tin or tar and paper, whether to buy a $10 knapsack or make a 65-cent one suffice, whether to scold the absent-minded bootblack for shoddiness of shine or tip him twice. Yet in these thousand thoughts of every day, which I am well ashamed to hear confess, I shall or shall not, should or shouldn't, may, I am creator of my own distress. And while I trudge from swampland home to train, my thoughts a muddle and my will opaque, nature does her best to entertain with the splendors of a sunrise on the lake. I'll just wrap up with one short poem which is a result of my discovery that there is actually no such color in nature as blue. Blue birds, blue water. We all know if you scoop the ocean into your hand, that water that was blue becomes clear. If you grind a bluebird's wing, it turns gray. It's all a function of light refraction. And this is a poem about that. No blue birds, only blue wavelengths bouncing on particles, glistening blue. No blue eyes, only blue sky, dancing in fragments, sparkling blue. No blue sky, only blue light, surfing on air streams, shimmering blue. No blue water, only blue echoes, rippling the firmament, burnishing birds. And I will conclude with a poem that I wrote, which is a conversation with my great-grandfather. And this is the poem that I was fortunate to win the Bridport Prize with. My great-grandfather was a coal miner and a poet. Coal miner by day and a poet by night, and he lived in a small mining town in northern England. And he traveled door to door, as Julie said, selling his poems. Actually, I have a poem about him that will explain him better than I can. This is the poem Door to Door. William Arthur Morris had a birthmark in the center of his back. The wrong side of the sheets, they said, and banished him to the scullery. He volunteered for the army and took up a post as camp barber. William Arthur Morris deserted the guards 5 days after the birth of his daughter. Bad character, said the discharge papers. 15 shillings and 29 days for his cardinal sin. William Arthur Morris upped sticks to a pit village. Deputy artist, they called him, at smoking concerts. 2 up, 2 down with a Privian coal while his wife scrubbed soot from their sheets in Temperance Street. William Arthur Morris sold poems door to door. He tickled the fancies of toffs and swells until he went to the sanatorium with the pox he contracted from his entertainments. Paralysis of the insane, said my great-grandfather's death papers. So I'm going to invite a guest reader to join me, my husband Steve Hamilton. Nice. Because this poem requires 2 voices. And Steve has graciously agreed to play the part.
I was compelled. I was pressed. No choice to do this.
Bad character.
Bad character.
Bad character, sir. So this poem is called Over the Tannoy. The tannoy is a British expression meaning a loudspeaker. And this is my call over the tannoy back in time to William Arthur Morris. The first part of the poem, as you can see, it's written in 2 columns. It's designed as 3 poems in one. So the first part of the column are William Arthur Morris's actual words. There was a time when his poems were being stolen, apparently, and sold as the work of other poets. And he discovered this and was upset enough about this to post signs around town advertising the fact that his poems were being stolen. And at a certain point when I was working on my mother's first memoir with her, we discovered a very small, very thin biography of William Arthur Morris written by the local historian in the town where he lived, because he was a coal miner and they called him the pitman's poet. And he wrote poetry which he performed around town in the evenings. A lot of his poems were about the horses, the pit ponies that worked in the mines in those days, pulling the carts and the wagons who seldom saw the light of day. So the first column is his words, the second column is my response to his words, my words, and then Steve and I will read the poem together as a third conjoined poem.
I wish to inform the public that several men have been duplicating my poems and are going door to door selling pirate copies of them. On the 9th March 1922, a warrant was issued for the arrest of a man who had traveled through Yorkshire, Notts, and Derbyshire and sold thousands of copies of my poem. He also stated in some cases that he was authorized by me to sell them. This is entirely a falsehood, as I employ no agents. All of my poems are copyright and fully protected and are entirely my own composition and property, and every one has my own photograph, as above, on the front of it. Should an impostor call and offer any of my poems for sale, will you kindly inform the police and oblige?
I could read your poems, not just the horses, the ones I don't know, your active workings, so I could own them. It would be like you and I, or maybe like I am unearthing your bones, as if they were mine, every one of them. Decades ago, between our lifetimes, sounds crazy, I know, but in a shaft of light, quite a bit farther than anywhere, you and I fused at the core, beyond genetics, mystically or cosmically. You might say it's undeniable. I am, like you, drilling in a similar vein, sometimes to a fault. But these days, that isn't enough. It must be a poem, to be mined, as if it were revealing your bones. There's that thread again, on the face. A fissure in everything I write. I will read your words, not to assess their value, but to fathom my own, and the muse, or anyone else who might answer.
I wish
I could read your poems,
to inform the public
not just the
that
horses,
several men
the ones I don't know,
have been duplicating
your active workings. So
my poems, and
I could own them. It would be like you and I,
are going door to door
or maybe like I am unearthing your bones,
selling pirate copies
as if they were mine, every one.
of them. On the 9th of March 1922,
Decades
a
ago,
warrant was issued
between our
for
lifetimes.
the arrest of the man who
Sounds crazy, I know.
had traveled
In a shaft of light,
through Yorkshire,
quite a bit farther than
Notts, Derbyshire, and
anywhere.
sold
You
thousands of copies
and I fused at the core.
of my poem. He also stated in some cases
beyond
that
genetics,
he was authorized
mystically or cosmically.
by me to sell them.
You might say
This is entirely a falsehood,
it's undeniable.
as I employ no agents.
I am like you, drilling
All my poems are
in a similar vein, sometimes
copyright and fully protected,
to a fault.
and are entirely my own.
But these days, that
Composition and property.
isn't enough. It must be a poem.
And every one has
To be mined, as if it were
my own photograph,
revealing your bones.
as above,
There's that thread again,
on the front
on the face.
of it.
A fissure in everything I write.
Should an imposter call
I will read your words,
and offer any of my poems
not to assess their value,
for sale,
but to fathom my own. And
will you kindly inform
the muse,
the police
or anyone else who might answer.
and oblige? Happy to sign any books if I haven't already.
Oh,
And
wonderful. Wonderful reading, Emma. We're so grateful to you. We're grateful to our wonderful audience. And Julie for a most beautiful introduction. And Steve for playing your very important part here.
Exactly.
Yes.
Most important.
So we do have copies of the book if you'd like to give gifts. We really appreciate you all coming out and supporting the poet and the bookshop. I hope we'll see you again soon. And this was just an extraordinary reading of the intimate and the universal across time and place. Such beautiful work. So another round of applause for everyone.
Thank you for having me. You are a local treasure. We adore you.
Yeah,
Truly.
we're